welcome is over. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Today's speaker is Bob Surridge. And as you know, what we're going to talk about is Southport Scoundrels. Let me explain how I got to Southport Scoundrels, because you all know there's no scoundrels, or never has been any scoundrels in Southport. That's kind of what happened. I've done a couple presentations, and one was about women at the turn of the 20th century, and it kind of bioed a group of women. Of course, there were no scoundrels in that group. And then I think a year ago or so, I did another presentation. It was called Gone and Sometimes Forgotten. And it was about people in Southport history who would, to my opinion, have done significant things for Southport, but we've really forgotten about them. And probably the major example of that is a man by the name of Abraham Galloway. Abraham Galloway was born a slave. His owner was the Methodist minister here in Southport. They taught Abraham trade of bricklaying. So he was a bricklayer. He escaped from here to Philadelphia to Canada, and that was right before the Civil War. So this man is a free man in Canada with a trade. You know, life could be very good for Abraham Galloway. It was very good. But what he did is he returned to North Carolina, and as a runaway slave, you know, his life was on the line as soon as he got into the United States and then into North Carolina. But his acts of bravery through the war and after the war certainly is a Southport native that has been often forgotten. So that was the kind of presentation that I did before. So in those two presentations and talking about a number of people, I really did. So okay, so what's kind of the little bit of the underbelly of all of this? There has to be a scoundrel or two in Southport's history. And to go through this presentation, I'm going to talk about a few of those. We're going to talk about one man who escaped from the old jail, and another one would be a man who could be that carpetbagger coming into town. Well, as soon as I learn how to use the machine, we'll start that. Okay, first, scoundrel definition, going back to good old Merriam-Webster. I took my wife has read it, isn't it? Yeah. Using her dictionary, scoundrel definition, a disreputable person. That's not quite enough to hold on here. Disreputable, not considered to be respectable in character. Digging a little deeper. Character, and I think the two primary words here are a complex of mental and ethical traits that define each of our characters. And then we certainly, kind of bringing it down to how we talk to each other and talk about other things. A person has a good character, a favorable character or tendency, and then bad character, having an evil character. So we're going to look at these people, and do they? The big question is really going to be: are they really evil? Is that what makes them a scoundrel, or is it something less than that? All right, some of the synonyms. And I've been working on this. Let's go through them. Bad egg, stinker, rat fink, rotter, bounder, blighter, turd, bugger, cad, very well. Blackguard named after, what if that's a dotard? But anyway, vagabond, varlet, rascallion, rogue, rascal, good for nothing, retrofit, cheat, swindler, fraud, trickster, charlatan, villain, beast, SOB, rat, louse, swine, dog, cur, hound, skunk, heel, snake, wretch, scumbag, meanie, scamp, batty, brute, liar, cheat, and creep. Does anyone have any other sayings? What about round
Rounder.
Rounder.
Around there.
A rounder. Okay. All right. So it's going to help us kind of determine whether these folks are scoundrels or not. Interestingly, we can start out with a rumor, a scoundrel rumor, if you will. And what the rumor is that when the British were blockading Charleston in the American Revolution, that they were receiving food and other staples from North Carolina. And not only just from North Carolina, but from the Lockwood Folly area of North Carolina. In fact, they were receiving fresh cattle, fresh meat from the Lockwood, this is the rumor, coming down through Lockwood Folly. Of course, you know, that's just right below us a few miles. And then the packet, they probably called packet boats at that time, taking it down to Charleston. I would submit that, talking about the revolution and the birth of our nation, that those folks might have been considered, by some anyway, to be scoundrels. Staying with the American Revolution, I want to start with Robert Howe Sr. Robert Howe Sr. was the highest ranking officer from North Carolina. He was a major general. In his history, first as a younger man, in 1766, he was commander here at Fort Johnston, such as it was at that time. After the start of the Revolution in 1777, he was commander of the Southern Department of the Continental Army. Continental Army was divided into 3 divisions at that time. So he was one of the 3 most important officers in the Continental Army as the commander of the Southern Department. In 1778, however, he lost the battle for Savannah, and he also then lost his command. Why? Why did he lose his command? Well, really, one reason is that he was really not that good of a general. He was certainly not a brilliant general, although that seems to me to be a perilous statement to make about an officer in the Continental Army when the commander of the Continental Army was certainly not a brilliant general himself, General Washington. So Howe was not a good or a brilliant general. However, Old Bob, as he was known, was notorious, not only in the Carolinas, but across all of the colonies as a womanizer. Notorious. This thing gets over here, and look at that one over there.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. All right. But scandalously, he divorced his wife after 18 years of marriage. Now, Janet Shaw wrote that this gentleman has the worst character. He is deemed a horrid animal. He devours women that come his way. Now, give me a little.
Who was she to him?
Yeah, she's the worst of divorce.
Janet Shaw was the woman from whose diary was taken to develop this Journal of a Lady of Quality. And this is kind of an advertisement for you, because that journal, for this 2-year period, the journal is 300 and some pages long, but it is available for you on the Southport Historical Society website. So you would go into the website, which is southportsociety.org, and then you would, from there, you would click into the Susie Carson Research Room, and then you would go into reports, and then you would look for this journal. So, quite interesting. She has a few other choice things to say about.
It's interesting that her name isn't on the cover.
That's true.
Is that a public site?
Yes, it is a public site. Yeah. I don't know whether Robert Howe Sr., Major General Robert Howe Sr., there's a memorial for him in the Smithville burying ground. One for Benjamin Smith and one for Robert Howe Sr. So, I don't know, perhaps he did not treat women here in this area in a horrid way. So the memorial is there. Also, Howe Street is named after him. Perhaps.
It's the son, because the son was one of the 5 commissioners.
Right. Yeah, the other, I said perhaps, so perhaps it was his son, Robert Howe Jr., who Howe Street is named after. As you said, notes, Robert Howe Jr. was one of the 5 original commissioners of the town of Smithville.
And he was a scoundrel. They wouldn't name the street after a scoundrel.
Are you calling Robert Howe Jr. a scoundrel?
I'm calling this man, see, that's
Yeah,
why
he is a scoundrel.
they wouldn't name a street for him.
No, of course not.
His son and daughter have the same name.
So, as everybody with you said, Robert Howe Sr. is a scoundrel.
Well, I believe in what you put up there in print. You've got me sold.
Okay. Moving on in history, Lanier Cravens was in Southport for a fairly short time, roughly 1907 to 1909. And he was a lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He was stationed at Fort Caswell. His responsibility at Fort Caswell was the development of the armaments at the fort at that time. I found this fella through his wife. I had done a little book a couple of years ago about women who contributed recipes to a 1907 cookbook. And his wife, Agnes, was one who contributed a recipe. So I started my kind of research going from there. In 1898, which was the Spanish-American War, Lanier Cravens was a sergeant in the Spanish-American War, and he then moved up as time went on to his position as a first lieutenant. He was here with his wife and his young daughter Fairfax. When he was here, was court-martialed twice. First, he was court-martialed, as this newspaper article says, for being drunk on duty. And then later, he was court-martialed for, he was accused of taking two payments that he was able to process that, and so he was paid twice. Both times, he was found guilty of both of those crimes. And both times, his sentence was commuted by President Theodore Roosevelt. I've tried to find a connection between the Cravens family and Roosevelt. The Cravens family, they're from Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they were very important family in that. His father was a judge, so I keep on looking for, is there a connection I can find between Roosevelt and the Cravens family? I have not found that connection at all. A little more of his history, because the idea is this man a scoundrel? He was one of the first Americans killed in the First World War. And he was at that time serving, he had retired from the US Army, and he was serving again as a non-commissioned officer in the Canadian Army. And he was killed in Belgium, right at the beginning of the war.
What's his connection to Southport?
He was an officer at Fort Caswell, living here for 2 years. That's his Southport connection. Actually, when he committed both of these crimes, he was in Fort Caswell, Southport. Just a little side note, his wife goes on to be a director of the American Red Cross in New York City. Got to be a family connection somewhere, but I'm just not finding it. So, question is, was he a scoundrel? Yeah. And maybe he was helped by a bit of a scoundrel at the same time. Going back a little bit to our General Benjamin Smith, which of course Southport was Smithville, was named after General Smith. And a young lady here in the audience recently did a little article, what she called Living History article, and she titled that Living History Pioneer Swindler Thoroughbred Prophet. That was by me, Seven Step. And in the State Port Pilot. When was it there? You don't remember the article?
No. I've written since 12 years, but no, I really don't remember. I know Ed wouldn't have let me have a title that long. I've never had a title, I mean, I might have had 2 in 8 years that I've had than what I wrote.
Okay.
No, I really don't.
In this
This is interesting.
article, talks about Smith receiving 12,000 acres of land of Tennessee land as payment for his service, in the Revolutionary War and his position as a general. So he receives that 12,000 acres. Now look at these dates. North Carolina University was chartered December 11th, 1789, and Smith happens to be one of the trustees of the new university. So December 11th, the university is chartered. On the 18th of December, Trustee Smith donates not just 20,000 acres of land to the new university.
Did he get to write it off his taxes?
This next date, though, 4 days later, on December 22nd, 1789, North Carolina ceded all of her Tennessee land to the U.S. government. So that all of that land that had been given to the university now become federal lands. Well, the courts went through that. But it really still is a question that you said, Rose. Did the university ever receive the benefit of Smith's donation?
But it's on every biography ever written about him, how generous he was.
Why? And they named the building after.
Oh yeah, one of the first buildings was.
So, is Smith a scoundrel? Let me stop that for a minute. Okay. Let's talk about Benjamin Smith and James Reed. Now, James Reed, there's no question. James Reed was a scoundrel, and what he was famous or infamous for was using other people's money. And he had a knack at that.
Like me.
So when Smith was 20 years old or so, the American Revolution started, and he was in a militia unit, if you will, that was commanded by James Reed. After the Revolution, Commander James Reed asked Benjamin Smith for a loan. A loan of money, which Smith agreed to, and he loaned Reed money. What was the result of that? I have the words proper order kind of in the title. Smith was an incredibly rich man for his times. He had money of his own down through his family, and then he married Sarah Dry Street, and who happened to be his cousin. So the families were close. Sarah Dry's father gave the new couple another plantation. And so over the years, in a sense, like Smith collected plantations, he had 4 or 5 of them, a number of them in the area, and part of his wealth was the 200 enslaved people that worked those plantations. He also had a bit of a problem in that he was, not only James Smith, but several others had convinced Smith to guarantee their debt, or he just loaned them straight out loaned them money. Back to Reed and Smith. Reed is then appointed tax collector of the Port of Brunswick. Smith signs a surety, or signs a bond that really allows Reed to take this position. Right? Guaranteed Reed's debt. 3 years later, Reed is audited. The Port of Brunswick is audited, and Reed is responsible, and Reed owes the state about 15,000 pounds. 15,000 pounds in today's dollars, Reed owes the state almost $3 million. An idea there. And I think Reed had a lot of nerve here, because being the scoundrel, he dies, and all of his debt is taken over by Benjamin Smith. Now this happens more than once with Smith, that he signs a surety and the person dies, or just flat out doesn't keep their finances in order. Reed, as I said, forever the scoundrel dies, and Smith is ruined because he has to take Reed's debt. Is that again the proper order? And maybe the proper order was Reed using Smith as kind of a dope. One part of this mystery, at the end of Smith's life, he didn't have any money, and you can read in some places that he went to debtor's prison and other places. That's a controversy. That no, he did not go to debtor's prison. His friends stood up for him, and then the death of Benjamin Smith. There's a mystery there too. Mystery is where exactly is he buried? Is he buried out of Brunswick town, or is he in the Smithville burying ground? And I guess there's even some thought that he may be buried in Wilmington.
Well, one thing about his death, the burial, they buried him at night because the people who were burying him, if the officials saw those, they would put the debt of Smith on them, so they didn't want to have any part of being friends of him. So they'd come after that, but they say first he was buried in his backyard. The woman's diary, what is it called, Miss
Clitherton.
Yeah, well, see, they use the words, they said he died in the poorhouse, but we didn't have a building for it. He died broke, but he died in his own house, but they said it was derelict, his mansion, because they had been able to pick it up, and he died in his own house when he was totally defeated, I mean, no money, nothing.
And also the diaries of Mrs. Clitherton, I think.
Clitheroe, it's got an A, Clitheroe.
Is also, if you can spell it, is also available on the Susie Carson Research Room website.
Could you repeat the name of it again?
Pardon me?
Could you repeat the name of it again?
Susie Carson?
No, the other, the name is
Cliff,
Mrs.
Clitheroe, Clitheroe.
Okay.
E-R-A-L-L.
A-L-L.
The blackboard.
I have a question. When Reed was a tax collector, was there a possibility he was embezzling money from the taxes too? You know. I mean,
Now we get to a carpetbagger. E.M. Rosafy. E.M. Rosafy was, came to this area from the north, but before that he was a Hungarian immigrant coming into the country. So, but he does fit that one criteria to be a carpetbagger. To be a carpetbagger, you have to originate to the north and come to the south. Those southern folks who acted like carpetbaggers were called, and I'm not going to remember what it is. Well, it will come.
There were Southerners who acted like
What?
carpet.
Yeah.
Scalawags.
Scalawags.
Scalawags. That was our homegrown.
Okay, so during this, or at the time of the Civil War, he's in West Virginia Light Artillery, 1865 to 1868. He's a justice of the peace for Brunswick County. 1868, 1869 were tough years for Ernest, was his first name, for Mr. Rosafy. So 68, he's sent to jail for unlawfully seizing property. 69 is found guilty of false imprisonment. 69 tried on charges of forcible trespass, and then also in 1869. You can see it there, he's appointed as an alien.
No background check.
No background check. Wait, I got a story at the end of this. No background check for sure. Oh, come on. I'm sorry. Okay, 1870. Why rejected from the Brunswick County Voting? That was, I believe that was here in Smithville at the time, if I recall. He also, the party chose a candidate for Senate. Rosafy went to work, and within a week or 2 weeks, Rosafy was the candidate for Senate. He was not elected. So, 1869, he's the agent for the Manchester Railroad. 1870, he's named customs inspector. 3 years later, he's dismissed from his job as customs inspector. 1 year later, he's reappointed as inspector of customs, and his wife was appointed as Smithville's postmistress. And then, as time went on, 1876, he's the postmaster.
Friends in high places.
Now, like all good politicians, He lands on his feet because he is appointed to a position in the patent office in Washington, D.C. At an annual salary of $1,000 a year. A lot of money. I don't know how he did all these things, you know, what his leverage was, but it seems pretty sure that he did. Scoundrel.
But soon they had a riot because there were 3 Republican factions. Because you had local people who had never wanted to get into war. We've always had people who were loyal to what they started with. So you had the homegrown people who were Whigs. Then you had the blacks who had been freed, and then you had the carpetbaggers and people who come back down. And they didn't have primaries, they fought it out at the convention.
Okay. This is where background checks are coming in. You're familiar with Jesse?
No, but I know the fall.
Jesse Walker, here in Brunswick County. Sheriff Jackson Stanley and his deputies went to, I believe it was Walker's father-in-law's house. Walker was there, and they wanted to arrest him, and it was really for a relatively minor charge. Jesse took umbrage with that, and he shot the sheriff. But as the song goes, he did not shoot the deputy. So the deputies arrest Walker. So he murders Sheriff Stanley, he's captured by the deputies, and he's jailed in Southport. A bit later, Walker escapes from the old, was the new jail then, but from the old jail now. He escapes from that jail. So he's got one murder and one escape. He escapes and he goes to Oklahoma. And again, I could not find much about exactly what he did besides that he murdered someone in Oklahoma, and he was convicted of that murder and sent to prison for 30 years. But you see, he didn't stay 30 years. So he escapes from the Oklahoma prison, 5 years later, so I may have been in jail for five years. Escapes from the Oklahoma prison. Escapes from the prison, comes back here to Brunswick County. There's a couple, two stories, which I don't know which one is true. One story is that he was arrested by a police officer in Wilmington who recognized him walking the streets. And the other story is that he was arrested while he was trying to get to his wife's home in Brunswick County. Don't know which one is true, but we do know that he was arrested, and this time he is convicted and given a 30-year sentence in the North Carolina State Prison in Raleigh. So that's, then 4 years later, he escapes from North Carolina State Prison. So this person has murdered two people, one an officer of the law, and escaped from jail three different times. You all know what's going to happen now.
Surprise.
Once he escapes from North Carolina prison in 1919, he goes to Gulfport, Mississippi. He marries a lady there, have a bit of a family, and he finds the Lord. And all that situation, he comes back and he turns himself in at the state prison in Raleigh. A bit confusing because I'm dealing with newspaper articles here. It's a bit confusing, but it talks about the warden giving him a pardon. Maybe that was the case at that time. At any rate, the warden gives him a pardon, saying he's the most capable, he's the most honest person in the state that I know. But, so that brings us to, he's pardoned in North Carolina, and that was about the middle of 1936. By the end of 1936, the state of Oklahoma also pardons him. How is this?
Who was that woman down in Mississippi?
Boy, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Who was that rascal? Well, notice he's got a tie on, his hair is white, so that's probably why. So,
He
that's.
had to have help. He must have been able to bribe people in any state he got in. I mean, really.
So what office did he run for? Appointed.
Should be sure.
All right.
Yeah.
You wanna try it? Bad egg, stinker, wrapping product? He's definitely he's probably beyond, certainly beyond a scoundrel. I think I saw a beast in
Trickster.
yeah. He's,
Rough.
he might be all of them.
Yeah, he probably fits those all.
Definitely a meaning, particularly if he left a wife here and then went down there, tried to see a wife here and then he went back down. He's a bigamist.
Yeah.
He's thrown
Bigamist.
in jail.
He's forgiven.
Go figure. Okay, I put this up because probably the primary source, what was the book called? Before We Were Quaint, Larry Mazel. That was a great book. I mean, I know it's big, but it must have 30.
Yeah, he interviewed
38.
people from here.
So you got 38 chapters in here.
And I think it's the best book we have on history. Even if you put Susie's together and everything else, it's deep, really good.
It's also the kind of book you can read, as you have some time, because each of the chapters is relatively short, takes a piece of Southport history. Now, take that history and he'll bounce around a little bit. And there's, like Cindy, I'm sure knows some of the folks that are in the book. You haven't read it? No, you gotta read it. Yeah, you gotta read it. So let me recommend that to you. I think I'm gonna hold it for another time. As I did this, anybody familiar with Margaret Curtis? Walter and Margaret Curtis? Okay, I'll hold that story for another time. I originally kind of thought in my mind I was gonna present Margaret Curtis as a scoundrel, but as I got doing it, I thought, no, she was just a woman of her, she was a woman of her time. She was the third wife, yeah, third wife. And the other thing was, really, as an amateur historian, I like this quote. It's not really the work to be a critic or definitely a moralist, it's, to be kind of a sleuth. And I really got the sense that when I was talking about this lady and thinking of her as a scoundrel, that I was trying to be the moralist. People in history, you may love or hate what they did or didn't do, but it was, for sure, it was the way we were. It was the way we were. And it's really quite unfair by whatever today's standard is to judge people of the past.
But history is a fact, but it's seen from different views. Like whoever you were working with will write a different biography of you and your wife. But it's still the truth, but it's from another point of view. But what about Applegate? The one I think was a scoundrel, the biggest. I was just waiting to see how you were gonna develop it.
What was his first name again?
It was, I can't remember. I was so impressed when you told me how to pronounce his name.
Yeah. Rapelier was a man who lived here part of the time in Southport. He was a Yankee to begin with, and then he moved around the country. He's best known for the Scopes trial in Tennessee. That whole trial was, if you will, staged, and Rapelier was the director. He essentially convinced the leaders in that community to set up a situation where Scopes, who was a school teacher, would be
And naive.
all right, would be charged with and I'm losing here because the
Well,
the
then
law,
why-
the state law. at that
Yeah,
time.
the law of evolution had passed, and they didn't want that taught. And he was a substitute for the science teacher one day and had one paragraph part of it.
But the big point here about
Right.
Rapelier staged all
Yeah,
of
he
this.
asked him to do it.
Because what they wanted was a big trial in their.
People come to town.
People come to
Tourism.
town. Tourism.
Rather than 4th of July, it's true. Well, yeah, I did try writing a column on that, and Ed didn't want it because I said we had 3 lawyers in town, and I mentioned the names, and one was his grandfather. That we had men that might have been part of it, because we had people meeting in the pharmacy men, just like they did the pharmacy out there. But this man had to submit houses. He was in jail for a while because he was running guns or doing something to the Germans. I
So
mean, he
you
really
can start the next presentation with Rapelier. The other one is Greasy Sam Watts. And it's, Mary Ellen is be a granddaughter, probably maybe a great granddaughter. His granddaughter suggested I use.
Well, his grandson.
He was a judge of questionable activities. I guess,
His
or actions.
grandson's the one that was at the Alderman's meeting last year wanting permission to be buried on a family plot, and they hadn't gotten permission back in the 50s or so.
Time is quarter after. Questions, anyone? Tim?
Have there been no scoundrels in Southport since the early 1900s?
Okay,